They built a water pipeline straight through my family's ranch without asking, without an easement, and without paying a single cent. When I asked what gave them the right, Karen, the HOA president, heels too high for gravel, just smirked and said, "The community voted. Your property was underutilized. Well, that pipeline's dry now. And Karen? She's about to find out who really owns the water around here." It all started 6 months ago when I inherited the old Langley Ranch from my Uncle Gene, God rest him. 214 acres of dryland pasture stretching just outside the town limits. It's not much to look at if you're the kind of person who measures value in square footage and granite countertops. But that land has history. My granddad ran cattle there. My cousins learned to ride horses on that dirt. And underneath it all, a little something called the Juniper Creek Aquifer. When I took over, I figured I'd spend my retirement fixing fences, growing tomatoes, maybe watching the sunset from the porch. Not fighting a petty, power-hungry HOA. But then came Karen. Karen Hollister, president of the High Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. Picture the type. Chardonnay at 3 p.m., calls the cops if your mailbox flag is up. She doesn't even live near my ranch. But High Ridge recently expanded their development to the southern slope, which butts right up against the northern edge of my land. One fine Monday morning, I woke up to the sound of heavy equipment, bulldozers, backhoes, trucks. I walked out with my coffee and saw a full-blown construction crew digging trenches across my north field. I flagged down the site manager and asked what the hell was going on. He pointed to a clipboard and said, "Installing a water pipeline for the new subdivision. HOA approved." I said, "This is my land. Where's your easement?" He shrugged. "Talk to the HOA. We're just contractors." So I did. I went to the next HOA board meeting at their flashy clubhouse. Karen was at the front, in her usual blazer and pearls, holding court like she was running for governor. I waited patiently, then politely asked why there was a pipeline going through my pasture. She looked at me like I was asking for free cable. "We put it to a vote," she said, flipping her bangs. "Parcel 116, your ranch, was deemed underutilized by the zoning committee. And according to Section 14B of the Community Expansion Act, we're within our rights to lay shared infrastructure across adjacent plots deemed non-residential." I laughed out loud. I told her she didn't have a single legal document allowing access to my land, no easement, no agreement, nothing. Karen leaned back, crossed her arms, and smiled like a snake in the sun. "You can try to fight it," she said, "but we've already laid down 600 feet of pipe. It'll be operational next month. Might be easier for everyone if you just cooperated." I could feel my blood pressure rising, but I didn't yell, didn't slam the table. Instead, I went home, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my file cabinet. Because here's what Karen didn't know, what none of them knew. Back in 2008, I bought a small, forgotten parcel of land 5 miles upstream. A forested hillside with a natural spring on it. At the time, I just liked the view. But that spring? It feeds the very aquifer that supplies water to every home in High Ridge Estates, including that shiny new pipeline. And I still owned it. While they laid pipe and drafted smug HOA memos, I quietly hired a hydrologist, got my permits in order, and had a control valve installed on the spring head, legal, inspected, certified. 2 days after Karen held a ribbon-cutting ceremony for the community water line, I turned it off. I'll admit, turning that valve felt good. Not spiteful, not petty, just correct. And I slept like a baby that night, knowing that for the first time in weeks, I wasn't the one being pushed around. But the funny thing about people like Karen, they don't back down when they're wrong.
No, they double down.
The next morning, I'd barely poured my second cup of coffee when I heard tires on gravel. A shiny black SUV pulled up to my gate, the kind that looks like it's never seen a dirt road. Out stepped Karen, in full HOA battle gear. Heels, pantsuit, clipboard in hand. She marched up to my fence like she owned the place and waved at me like I was a Walmart greeter.
"Hi there," she said.
"We noticed an interruption in water flow this morning and tracked it to your property. Just a quick formality. We'll need to inspect your well system and aquifer connection." I took a long sip of coffee, leaned on the post, and said, You mean my spring? My aquifer? On my land? That one. She blinked.
Didn't like that.
Well, since the community relies on it, we consider it shared infrastructure under subdivision clause. I cut her off. That clause applies to common property.
My land isn't in your subdivision, Karen.
And I've got the deeds, permits, and water rights to prove it. She tried to keep smiling, but it cracked around the edges. Then she switched tactics, condescension. Look, I know legalese can get confusing for, ranch folks. But this is just how HOAs work. It's really in everyone's best interest. I couldn't help but laugh. Karen, I used to draft water rights claims for the state of Colorado. I've forgotten more legalese than you'll read in your entire HOA handbook. Her jaw actually dropped for half a second before she recomposed herself. Well then, she said, you'll know this is far from over. And she stomped back to her SUV like a lady in a soap opera who just realized she married the wrong man. By that afternoon, I was getting calls from neighbors I didn't even know. Hey man, do you got any idea why our water pressure is gone? You want a well? You know anything about a valve? My wife says the HOA is blaming you. Blaming me? Of course they were. Karen sent out a community-wide email titled Urgent, Interruption of Water Supply Due to Private Action, accusing me of tampering with municipal infrastructure and warning that legal steps were being explored. That email made it sound like I was some outlaw in a cowboy movie, twirling my mustache while cutting off the town's water. What she didn't mention, the HOA never had permission to tap into the source to begin with. They skipped permits, skipped easement negotiations, skipped literally everything except drawing a dotted line on a map and calling it theirs. So I did what any reasonable man would do. I walked into the county recorder's office with a binder full of documents, maps, hydrological reports, deeds. I sat down with Marcia, the clerk who's been there for 30 years and still remembers when Karen used to sell Avon. I explained everything. The pipeline, the illegal access, the water diversion. Marcia gave me that tight-lipped smile, the kind she uses when she's trying not to burst into laughter. I've got half the HOA calling complaints, she said. But funny thing is, not one of them has filed a single permit. You've got water rights upstream, access, and control valves. You're clean. Then she leaned in and whispered, Karen's playing HOA politics in a town that still believes in land deeds. By day 3, the subdivision was bone dry. Garden hoses were limp. Sprinklers were dead. Toilets flushed only once. The community pool closed indefinitely. Karen held another emergency HOA meeting, and oh, you better believe I went. She started with theatrics, talking like a politician during a hurricane. This disruption was unforeseen and stems from a private landowner acting outside the spirit of cooperation. People were furious. The retirees in golf shirts were red in the face. The single moms with toddlers weren't buying it. Even old Mr. Hankerson, who normally sided with the HOA on everything, stood up and asked, why the hell didn't we get a permit before laying pipe on someone else's ranch? Karen dodged and deflected. Said they had verbal assurance, which is not, and never will be, legally binding. I raised my hand. When she tried to skip me on the speaker list, the crowd actually booed. So I took the mic, walked up front, and held up the deeds. Here's the problem, I said. You laid infrastructure across private property without permission. You diverted water without rights. And now you want to paint me as the villain? I've done everything by the book. You haven't even read the book. Dead silence. You want water? Get your own source. Or come to the table like adults and negotiate a supply contract. But the days of bullying ranchers are over. Someone in the back yelled, "Preach." Another clapped. Then another. Karen sat down. Didn't say a word. But that wasn't the end. Oh no. The HOA's next move? They tried to sue me. Claimed I was withholding water essential to community operations. Tried to argue I had a moral obligation to open the valve since I knew they needed it. The case lasted one hearing. The judge? A retired Marine who owns land himself. He read the file, looked at Karen and said, "You built a pipeline through someone's land with no easement, no permit, and now you're upset he controls the source?" Case dismissed. Then he turned to me and said, "You want reimbursement for damages, Mr. Langley?" I said, "No, just peace." He smiled. "You're a better man than me." I thought after the lawsuit flopped harder than a vegan steak at a Texas barbecue, Karen would finally throw in the towel. She didn't.
Nope.
Instead, she declared war. Not the kind with weapons, but the HOA kind. The passive-aggressive, role-twisting, fine-slapping, newsletter-blasting kind. And let me tell you, Karen wields a clipboard like most folks wield a shotgun. It started with letters.
Lots of them.
Every morning for a week, I found bright yellow HOA notices stuffed in my mailbox, even though I don't live in the HOA. Violation number 117. Unapproved fencing material visible from community road. Violation number 203. Livestock creating odor offensive to adjacent homeowners. Violation number 388. Standing water poses a mosquito risk to shared airspace. Shared airspace. What is this, the Pentagon? I ignored them at first, thinking it was a tantrum. But then came the code enforcement officer. A poor guy sent out from the city with a clipboard and a confused look. "Sir," he said, "we received multiple complaints about zoning infractions. Says here's something about unauthorized water control." I showed him the permit, the water rights, and the judge's ruling. He whistled low and said, "Yep, looks like you're solid. Sorry to bother you." Then he added almost under his breath, "Honestly, we've been getting flooded with calls from that HOA. Half of it's nonsense." He left shaking his head. It was clear by then, Karen was abusing every bureaucratic channel she could find, trying to bury me in red tape. And when that didn't work, she went personal. One evening, I drove into town and noticed something new pinned to the bulletin board outside the post office. A flyer titled "Is Your Water Safe?" It had a photo of my ranch and a caption that read, "Local water source controlled by private citizen with unknown qualifications. Community safety at risk."
She was trying to smear me.
But here's the kicker. She included her phone number at the bottom, pretending to be a concerned community member seeking transparency. The problem?
People around here know me.
And they sure as hell know her. Old-timers started coming up to me at the diner. "Langley, that HOA woman's off her rocker," one said. Even Reverend Matthew chuckled and said, "If Jesus had to deal with HOAs, we'd still be waiting on the Sermon on the Mount." But then Karen made a critical mistake. In her desperation to regain control of the water, she called an emergency vote among HOA board members to approve a new pipeline extension, one that would bypass my ranch entirely by cutting across another neighbor's land. A smaller parcel, owned by a sweet widow named Doris Miller. Doris doesn't do email. She doesn't drive. And she sure doesn't speak legal jargon. So Karen took advantage. Told her the HOA just needed temporary access to lay a minor utility line. Got her to sign a waiver written in 6-point font, tiny, dense text that actually granted permanent easement. I found out when I saw surveyor flags lining Doris's property. I drove over and asked what was going on. She said, "Oh, just some pipes." Karen said it was standard. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about me anymore. Karen was willing to lie to and exploit a 74-year-old widow just to get around my land. That night, I made a phone call to my cousin in the county planning department. Turns out, the new pipeline route had been rushed through with a fast-track permit, rubber-stamped thanks to a friendly HOA board member with connections. I filed a complaint immediately. So did Doris, once I explained what she'd really signed. And it turns out, getting a senior citizen to sign a legal waiver without full disclosure is a very serious matter. The county launched an investigation. Karen, of course, tried to spin it. "It's a misunderstanding," she said. "We were just trying to secure water for families." But now she was in hot water of a different kind. Because while all this was happening, I'd also contacted a local journalist, a guy who does Sunday feature pieces on small-town scandals. I handed him everything. Maps, emails, the HOA's failed pipeline, the lawsuit, Doris's story, the smear flyers, my permits, my documents. He ran the piece under the headline, "The HOA that tried to steal a spring." It went viral, well, viral for a small town. shared over 7,000 times, picked up by a regional affiliate. The comment section turned into a digital pitchfork mob. And Karen? She started getting real quiet. But she still had one more card to play. She called for a full HOA community vote to determine whether they should move forward with alternative legal action against me and any other non-compliant entities. Translation: Doris and anyone who disagreed with her. The meeting was packed. People brought lawn chairs. Someone even grilled hot dogs. Karen walked up to the mic and gave this over-the-top speech about protecting the integrity of high-ridge estates and standing up to obstructionists. Then came the vote. One by one, residents raised their hands. She lost, 83-4. Even her own vice president voted against her. That very night, the board removed Karen as president. The new president? A level-headed veteran named Bill Rawlings. He immediately froze all HOA expansion projects. A week later, I got a handwritten letter in the mail. Mr. Langley, * on behalf of High Ridge Estates, I apologize for everything you've endured. If you're open to it, I'd love to sit down and discuss fair terms for future water use. * Signed, Bill. Now that's how adults handle problems. Karen? She's gone. Quiet word is she moved to Florida to be closer to family. But rumor has it she's already arguing with the HOA down there. And Doris? She started a garden with her granddaughter, using water from the very same spring Karen tried to hijack. I helped her install a spigot. We laugh about it now. But let me tell you something. When someone builds a pipeline across your land without asking, then tries to crush you with bureaucracy, then lies to your neighbors to steal their land too, you don't just shut off the water. You expose them. You outlast them. And you let their own arrogance drown them. I thought it was over. The pipeline was dry. The lawsuit was dead. Karen was voted out. I was finally back to tending tomatoes, minding my cows, and enjoying my coffee while the sun rose over my now peaceful ranch. But then the van showed up. A big white Sprinter van with a logo on the side. * Real Voices. America's Changing Neighborhoods. * out jumped a guy in a windbreaker with big city hair, holding a mic. Behind him, a woman with a camera the size of a small dog and sunglasses indoors. They came marching up my gravel drive like they were filming 60 Minutes. I stepped outside, wiping my hands on a rag. Before I could even ask what they wanted, the man smiled wide, like a toothpaste ad, and said, "Hi there. We're doing a human interest piece on rural water disputes. We'd love to get your side of the story." I looked past him, and sure enough, there she was, Karen, sitting in the front seat of the van, sipping from one of those obnoxious metal tumblers with a glittery sticker that probably said HOA Queen. She waved like we were old friends. That's when it hit me. This wasn't journalism. This was PR. The documentary crew was her last-ditch effort, a reputation salvage mission. Try to make herself look like the victim. Paint me as the grumpy, backward rancher who selfishly cut off water to hardworking families. And maybe, just maybe, use the footage to strong-arm her way into some HOA sympathy votes elsewhere. What Karen didn't realize. I was more than ready. I invited them in, made coffee, laid out cookies. Let them set up their camera in my barn, where I keep a wall covered in maps, deeds, and water reports like some polite conspiracy theorist. They started soft. "So, you own the land and the water source? That must give you a lot of power." I smiled. "Only if folks try to take it without asking." The interviewer leaned forward. "Some say you turned off the supply out of spite, that you had other options." I nodded, calm as a sunrise. Sure, I had options. I could have sued, could have gone to the press, could have demanded payment. But I didn't. I just stopped giving away something I own. That's not spite. That's boundaries. Then I reached behind me and pulled out a file folder, 2 inches thick. Dropped it on the table. "These are the permits your subject forgot to mention. This," tapping a map, "is the illegal pipeline route. This," holding up an email, "is where she threatened legal action for me not donating my water." Their smiles cracked. Then I showed them the flyer Karen made, the one questioning my qualifications to manage a water source. "I'm a licensed hydrological engineer," I said. "Spent 15 years working for the state water board."
Karen?
She once fined a man $300 for leaving his trash can out past noon. The camera woman snorted. Couldn't help herself. When I was done, I looked straight into the lens and said, "You want a story about changing neighborhoods? Here it is. A homeowners association tried to run roughshod over an old rancher. Only problem was, the old rancher read the fine print. They wrapped early. Karen never got her on-camera moment. She left before the sun even hit noon. Didn't say goodbye." 2 weeks later, the segment aired, 10 minutes long. I was the main voice. The piece painted HOA abuse for what it was. Showed real documents. Featured an interview with Doris. Even got a soundbite from the judge, who threw out Karen's case. The final shot? My spring, crystal clear water trickling down the rocks, with my cattle grazing in the background. Sometimes the person they try to steamroll is the one holding the valve. After that, things changed. The state HOA Oversight Board launched a quiet ethics investigation. Word got around that Karen had fudged voting procedures, forged consent forms, and spent HOA funds on PR projects without board approval. The new HOA president, Bill, showed up at my ranch with a handshake and a reasonable offer. "We want to build a fair contract for water access. Transparent terms. You set the price." I agreed, under one condition. Doris gets free water for life.
Deal signed.
Pipeline rerouted, legally this time. Community water restored. No drama. No yelling. Just paperwork and handshakes. And one very big lesson. As for Karen, the last I heard, she was trying to get on a new HOA board in Florida. But when her name popped up in a background search, they passed her over. Apparently, a certain viral documentary clip made the rounds among the board. Especially the part where she smirks and says, asterisk, the community voted his land was underutilized. Asterisk. Yeah, that didn't age well. Now the ranch is quiet. The pipeline's buried, with permission this time. The tomatoes are coming in nice. Dora stops by with her granddaughter to fill up watering cans. Sometimes I sit by the spring and just listen. It's not just the sound of water. It's the sound of peace. Because here's the thing, you don't need to yell to get justice. Sometimes, all you need is patience, paperwork, and the power to turn off the tap. It's funny what happens when the noise dies down. No more flyers. No more bulldozers. No more HOA drama clogging up my mailbox. Just morning sun. Cattle grazing slow. And the gentle sound of that spring flowing, like it always has. Quiet. Steady. Unstoppable. Karen was gone. The HOA board was cleaned out and rebuilt with folks who actually knew how to read a budget and treat people like neighbors, not suspects. And me? I finally had what I wanted from the start. Respect.